Chapter 32. Burning Bridges. They stayed up late into the night, talking with Maddie and Az about their discoveries, their escape into the wild, and the founding of the smoke. Finally, Tally had to ask them the question that had been on her mind since she'd first seen them. So how did you two change yourselves back? I mean, you were pretty, and now you're...
Ugly?
Az smiled.
That part was simple. We're experts in the physical part of the operation. When surgeons sculpt a pretty face, we use a special kind of smart plastic to shape the bones. When we change new pretties to middle or late, we add a trigger chemical to that plastic, and it becomes softer, like clay.
Ew, Tally said, imagining her face suddenly softening so she could squish it around to a different shape.
With daily doses of this trigger chemical, the plastic will gradually melt away and be absorbed into the body. Your face goes back to where it started, more or less.
Tally's eyebrows rose. More or less?
We can only approximate the places where bone was shaved away. We can't make big changes, like someone's height, without surgery. Maddie and I have all the non-cosmetic benefits of the operation. Impervious teeth, perfect vision, disease resistance. But we look pretty close to the way we would without the operation. As far as the fat that was sucked out,
he patted his stomach.
That proves very easy to replace.
But why? Why would you want to be ugly? You were doctors, so there was nothing wrong with your brains, right? Our minds are fine, Maddie answered. But we wanted to start a community of people who didn't have the lesions. People who were free of pretty thinking. It was the only way to see what difference the lesions really made. That meant we had to gather a group of uglies. Young people, recruited from the cities. Tally nodded. So you had to become ugly too. Otherwise, who'd trust you? We refined the trigger chemical, created a once-a-day pill. Over a few months, our old faces came back. Maddie looked at her husband with a twinkle in her eye. It was a fascinating process, actually. It must have been, Tally said. What about the lesions? Can you create a pill that cures them? They were both silent for a moment. Then Maddie shook her head. We didn't find any answers before special circumstances showed up. Az and I are not brain specialists. We worked on the question for 20 years without success. But here in the smoke, we've seen the difference that staying ugly makes. I've seen that myself, Tally said, thinking of the difference between Paris and David. Az raised an eyebrow.
You catch on pretty fast then. But we know there's a cure,
David said. How? There has to be, Maddie said. Our data showed that everyone has lesions after their first operation. So when someone winds up in a challenging line of work, the authorities somehow cure them. The lesions are removed secretly, maybe even fixed with a pill like the bone plastic. And the brain returns to normal. There must be a simple cure.
You'll find it one day,
David said quietly. We don't have the right equipment, Maddie said, sighing. We don't even have a pretty human subject to study. But hang on, Tally said. You used to live in a city full of pretties. When you became doctors, your lesions went away. Didn't you notice that you were changing? Maddie shrugged. Of course we did. We were learning how the body worked and how to face the huge responsibility of saving lives. But it didn't feel as if our brains were changing. It felt like growing up. Oh, but when you looked around at everyone else, how come you didn't notice they were brain damaged? Az smiled.
We didn't have much to compare our fellow citizens with. Only a few colleagues who seemed different from most people, more engaged. But that was hardly a surprise. History would indicate that the majority of people have always been sheep. Before the operation, there were wars and mass hatred and clear-cutting. Whatever these lesions make us, it isn't a far cry from the way humanity was in the rusty era. These days were just a bit easier to manage.
Having the lesions is normal now, Maddie said. We're all used to the effects. Tally took in a deep breath, remembering Sol and Ellie's visit. Her parents had always been so sure of themselves, and yet in a way so clueless. But they'd always seemed that way. Wise and confident, and at the same time disconnected from whatever ugly real-life problems Tally was having. Was that pretty brain damage? Tally had always thought that was just how parents were supposed to be. For that matter, shallow and self-centered was how brand new pretties were supposed to be. As an ugly, Paris had made fun of them, but he hadn't waited a moment to join in the fun. No one ever did. So how could you tell how much was the operation and how much was just people going along with the way things had always been? Only by making a whole new world, which is just what Maddie and Az had begun to do. Tally wondered which had come first, the operation or the lesions. Was becoming pretty just bait to get everyone under the knife? Or were the lesions merely a finishing touch? Perhaps the logical conclusion of everyone looking the same was everyone thinking the same. She leaned back in her chair. Her eyes were blurry, and her stomach clenched whenever she thought about Paris, her parents, and every other pretty she'd ever met. How different were they, she wondered. How did it feel to be pretty? What was it really like behind those big eyes and exquisite features?
You look tired,
David said. She laughed softly. It seemed like weeks since she and David had arrived there. A few hours of conversation had changed her world, maybe a little.
I guess we'd better go, Mom.
Of course, David. It's late, and Tally has a lot to digest. Maddie and Naz stood, and David helped Tally up from the chair. She said goodbye to them in a daze, flinching inside when she recognized the expression on their old and ugly faces. They felt sorry for her, sad that she'd had to learn the truth, sad they'd been the ones to tell her. After 20 years, maybe they'd gotten used to the idea, but they still understood that it was a horrible fact to learn. 99% of humanity had something done to their brains, and only a few people in the world knew exactly what.
You see why I wanted you to meet my parents?
Yeah, I guess I do. Tally and David were in the darkness, climbing the ridge back toward the smoke, the sky full of stars now that the moon had set.
You might have gone back to the city not knowing.
Tally shivered, realizing how close she'd come so many times. In the library she'd actually opened the pendant, almost holding it to her eye. And if she had, the specials would have arrived within hours.
I couldn't stand that,
David said. But some uglies must go back, right?
Sure. If they get bored with camping out and we can't make them stay.
You let them go? When they don't even know what the operation really means? David stopped and took hold of Tally's shoulder, anguish on his face.
Neither do we. And what if we told everyone what we suspect? Most of them wouldn't believe us, but others would go charging back to the cities to rescue their friends, and eventually the cities would find out what we were saying and would do everything in their power to hunt us down.
They already are, Tally said to herself. She wondered how many other spies the specials had blackmailed into looking for the smoke, how many times they'd come close to finding it. She wanted to tell David what they were up to, but how? She couldn't explain that she'd come here as a spy, or David would never trust her again. She sighed. That would be the perfect way to stop herself from coming between him and Shay.
You don't look very happy.
Tally tried to smile. David had shared his biggest secret with her. She should tell him hers, but she wasn't brave enough to say the words. It's been a long night, that's all. He smiled back.
Don't worry, it won't last forever.